Wyoming, the least populated state in America, yet somehow the most wide open. To many, it's a stretch of empty land between more familiar places, but to those who look closer, it's something else entirely. Long before borders were drawn or railroads laid steel across the plains, this was a land of movement. Shoshone, Crow, Arapaho, and Lakota families followed game across high plateaus and through river-carved canyons. In the 1800s, that rhythm was interrupted. First came trappers, then wagon trains pushing west, and later the Union Pacific Railroad, cutting a permanent line through the wild. By 1868, it became a territory, and by 1890, it joined the Union as the 44th state. But Wyoming was never easy to define. It offered no great cities, no easy farming, just hard winters and space so vast, it felt like silence. Maybe that's why Wyoming became a state of firsts. The first state to grant women the right to vote. The first to elect a female governor, not out of ideology, but necessity. Because here, independence wasn't a principle, it was survival. And beneath it all, something ancient stirred. Heat builds and pressure shifts, fueling the geysers, hot springs, and shifting ground above, the work of a still active supervolcano. This energy gives rise to landscapes found nowhere else. Valleys where elk and pronghorn still run. Peaks cut sharp from granite. And two of the wildest ecosystems left in America, Yellowstone National Park and the Grand Tetons. This is where the American West was tested and where the wild was never fully tamed. These are the wonders of Wyoming. Grand Teton National Park. Millions of years ago, a fault beneath the surface slipped, dropping the valley while lifting the mountains above it. The result is the Teton Range, a jagged spine of rock stretching 40 miles north to south. This dramatic uplift is now protected within Grand Teton National Park, a 310,000-acre sanctuary for some of the most iconic landscapes in the American West. At its center rises Grand Teton Peak, 13,775 feet tall. It's not just the highest summit here, it's the most revered, a monument shaped by glaciers, defined by granite, and surrounded by stories passed down through generations. Below it lies Jackson Hole, a broad glacial valley held between the peaks. Near its southern edge sits the town of Jackson, once a rough outpost for trappers and traders. Today, it still carries the look of the Old West, framed by mountains on every side. The valley is dotted with lakes so clear they reflect the entire range, like sky-colored mirrors laid at the foot of stone. The Snake River cuts through the valley like a slow-moving thread, its course carved by glacial runoff and time. Wildlife thrives in every part of the park. Bison graze slowly across the open grasslands. Moose wade through willows and shallows along riverbanks, but it's the elk that define the rhythm of the valley. More than 7,000 migrate through the region each year, making this one of the largest elk herds in North America. In the early hours, they step into the water one by one, slipping between banks in search of quieter ground. Herds move as a single shape, spreading across the valley, then tightening again as they pass through narrow clearings. Their presence feels old, like part of the land itself. Near the base of the range, a row of wooden homesteads still stands, remnants of Mormon settlers who came here in the 1890s. The barns face the mountains as if in conversation, weathered but unmoved, and settled into the land. Jackson Lake. Glaciers once swept through this valley, carving a deep basin in the shadow of the Tetons. Today, Jackson Lake fills that space. For centuries, Shoshone and Bannock tribes moved through this landscape, following migration routes, hunting elk, and fishing these cold waters. Beneath the surface, pine-covered islands mark the tops of a drowned forest. The shoreline looks natural, but its shape was redrawn by design. From Jackson Point Overlook, the full sweep of lake and mountain comes into view. Sky, water, and granite aligned in a single frame. The surface becomes still enough to mirror the entire Teton Range with perfect clarity until the first boat cuts across the water and the reflection fractures. Devil's Tower. A sheer column of phonolite porphyry rises 867 feet from the Belle Fourche River Basin, its hexagonal cracks forming near-perfect vertical grooves. Devil's Tower formed when magma cooled underground some 50 million years ago, later exposed as softer sedimentary rock eroded away. The gaps between its columns stretch up to 4 feet wide, just enough for climbers to wedge their hands and feet into the stone. President Theodore Roosevelt named it America's first national monument in 1906, and by 1941, nearly 5,000 climbers had scaled its face using only ropes and pitons. Hundreds of routes trace the tower, though climbing pauses each June in recognition of native ceremonies held at its base. For the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Kiowa, this is Bear Lodge, central to creation stories where a great rock rose to save young girls from a bear. Its silhouette became iconic after Spielberg's film, but its power lies elsewhere, in the silence, at dawn. Sunlight Basin. The road into Sunlight Basin climbs through switchbacks and silence. Below, the valley opens wide, held between the volcanic slopes of the Absaroka Range, and the granite shoulders of the Beartooths. At 60 feet, light cuts through quickly here, turning morning fog into a sweep of meadows, sage flats, and shadowed ridgelines. Horses sometimes graze in the distance, scattered across the open land like moving shadows. Sunlight Creek runs low and clear across the basin floor, carving into rock laid down by eruptions 50 million years ago. In the 1890s, prospectors traced old Shoshone trails into the basin chasing gold. What they found was copper. The camps emptied within a decade, and the tailings they left behind have since folded back into the earth. A few families still live here, where isolation is less a challenge than a way of life. Stories travel by word of mouth, and routines follow the land, set more by weather than by clock. Yellowstone National Park. Declared the world's first national park in 1872, Yellowstone spans more than 2.2 million acres across Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, a crossroads of cultures and a landscape still alive with change. For over 10,000 years, indigenous peoples lived with this land, not just on it. Tribes like the Shoshone, Crow, Bannock, and Blackfeet traveled these valleys, hunted along the riverbanks, and passed down stories shaped by the geysers and peaks. Beneath its surface, heat pulses from a supervolcano, one of the largest active magma systems on the planet. Hills shift, rivers vanish into steam, and new thermal springs break through soil that once seemed settled. In the lower Geyser Basin, Great Fountain Geyser builds pressure below ground until it explodes in towering bursts up to 200 feet high. Though less predictable than Old Faithful, its eruptions can last more than 10 minutes. What looks still is often just waiting. Yellowstone Lake sits over 7,700 feet above sea level, calm on the surface, but hiding boiling vents and deep volcanic fractures below. From here, the Yellowstone River begins its descent, cold, steady, and older than the land it crosses. It flows through forests and wide valleys, slipping past meadows where steam drifts from the earth. In some places, the current is quiet. In others, it rushes fast over stone, reshaping the land with every turn. The terrain opens into the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, where the earth seems to split apart. Sheer cliffs in gold, ochre, and rust line the gorge, stained by heat and mineral-rich water. These colors come from hydrothermal alteration, steam and gas rising through the rock for thousands of years, painting the canyon walls from within. The river keeps moving, sculpting the canyon not in sudden force, but moment by moment, the way time leaves its mark. Then, it begins to fall. The first drop comes at the Upper Falls, a 109-foot plunge that begins the river's steepest descent. But it's farther downstream where the canyon gives up its greatest sound, the Lower Falls. Thundering down more than 300 feet in a single powerful sheet. It's more than twice the height of Niagara. And when the water hits the rocks below, the canyon seems to tremble. Wildlife has always defined Yellowstone, with over 60 species of mammals and hundreds of birds, amphibians, and fish. It's one of the most concentrated ecosystems in North America. Nowhere else in the lower 48 states do so many large animals still roam free. The bison are the heart of it. Yellowstone protects the last continuously wild population of plains bison in the country, descendants of millions, now moving in the thousands. They shape the land, grazing in open meadows and resting where their ancestors once lay. In spring, red-furred calves follow close behind their mothers. In fall, the bulls wallow in dust and lock horns in slow, rhythmic battles. Elk move through in even greater numbers. More than 10,000 migrate through the park, spreading into higher ground as the snow recedes. They drink at river crossings, graze by the lakes, and cross valleys in herds that ripple through the grass. For predators, wolves, bears, mountain lions, they are the lifeblood of the food chain. Then, on the open flats, the pronghorn. Often mistaken for antelope, they are faster than any land animal on the continent. Yellowstone holds only a fraction of their original range, but still they move across the open flats with the same instinct they've followed for millennia. They're a species all their own, North America's last surviving remnant of a much older time. Yellowstone holds all of them, not as exhibits, but as part of a system still turning, where wildlife sets its own rules and the land listens. Grand Prismatic Spring. Steam rises from a 370-foot wide pool, its edges ringed with color, deep blue at the center, fading to oranges and reds like a spectral wheel. The Grand Prismatic Spring holds steady at 160 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, heated by a magma chamber 8,000 feet below Yellowstone. This is the largest hot spring in the United States. Its surreal color bands are created by thermophilic bacteria, microscopic organisms that thrive in extreme heat. Long before it was studied by scientists, this landscape was part of the ancestral territory of tribes like the Crow and Shoshone. Many indigenous groups viewed Yellowstone's geothermal features with reverence, as sacred expressions of the Earth's raw energy. Over 2,100 liters of water evaporate every minute, yet underground springs continuously replenish the pool. Modern sensors now track subtle changes in its chemistry, revealing deeper connections to the park's volcanic systems. Boardwalks trace the outer rim, where drifting steam hides the spring's true size, but from a nearby hillside, the full pattern emerges. A living palette shaped by heat, minerals, and time. Excelsior Geyser. Just steps from Grand Prismatic, Excelsior seethes with constant motion. A deep blue basin where steam never stops rising. Once one of Yellowstone's most violent geysers, it now discharges over 4,000 gallons a minute into the Firehole River. Its eruptions long gone, but its power still visible. No color rings its edge, just boiling water and the weight of what lies below. Snake River. The Shoshone called it Yam-pa-pa, river flowing through a narrow place. Carved by snowmelt from the Continental Divide, the Snake River drops 2,000 vertical feet as it cuts across western Wyoming, its path shaped by the same fault line that lifted the Teton Range. A river of extremes, it moves through wide bends and deep canyons, slowing near Jackson Lake to just 5 miles per hour. Further downstream, strong rapids twist through narrow canyons, where Lewis and Clark passed in 1805, steering by instinct through a landscape they were charting for the first time, a waterway both beautiful and unforgiving. The current winds through alpine valleys and cottonwood groves, where golden aspens shimmer beside the dark rise of spruce. Its bends still follow ancient geological faults, 10 million years in the making, a force of nature harnessed, but never tamed. Cheyenne. Founded in 1867 as a railroad stop, Cheyenne quickly became the heart of Wyoming's cattle and rail industry. Its role as the state capital began in 1890, marked by the construction of the state capitol building with its iconic gold dome. The city's legacy is deeply tied to rodeos, frontier traditions, and Western heritage. Cheyenne Frontier Days remains one of the oldest and largest rodeos in the world. Surrounded by open prairie, the city still carries the spirit of the Old West. Star Valley and Salt River. The Salt River moves slowly through Star Valley, a 70-mile-long basin held between the Salt River Range and Caribou Mountains. Its waters braid across the flat valley floor, carving shallow channels that weave between hayfields, fences, and cattle pastures. For For centuries, Shoshone bands camped along its banks, returning each year to fish and gather bitterroot. By the 1870s, Mormon settlers followed the same river, building farms and irrigation ditches that still thread across the plains. The river remains the valley's lifeblood, filling reservoirs, feeding pastures, and marking the rhythm of daily life. From above, it looks like silver thread stitched through green, unfolding slowly, as it has for generations. Afton and Swift Creek. Surrounded on all sides by the ridgelines of the Salt River and Caribou Ranges, Afton sits quietly in a narrow stretch of western Wyoming. It's a small town with broad streets, wooden storefronts, and a pace shaped more by seasons than schedules, where the mountains are always visible, no matter which direction you turn. To the east, Swift Creek slips through a narrow canyon fed by one of the strangest springs in the world. The intermittent spring, also called periodic spring, runs in cycles, flowing for 18 minutes before vanishing into silence, then returning again. Scientists believe a hidden siphon inside the mountain is what makes the spring stop and start again. It's one of the largest rhythmic springs on Earth, and one of the few accessible by trail. Just beyond the spring, Janae Falls cuts a thin ribbon through stone, its water joining Swift Creek before the forest folds around it again. The creek gathers momentum as it moves through the canyon and into town, passing cottonwoods and trailheads before joining the Salt River. Sunlight Creek Bridge. A steel truss spans 296 feet above Sunlight Creek, the highest bridge in Wyoming, clinging to the volcanic walls of a canyon carved 50 million years ago. Built in the early 20th century to connect isolated mining claims and ranching routes near the Beartooth Plateau, it provided a crucial crossing in a region once impassable by wagon. Vehicles cross slowly over its single lane, tires humming against steel grating that reveals the chasm below. The creek winds through shadowed rock, its name recalling the morning prospectors saw sunlight break through the fog and spill into the basin, a brief moment etched into the land. Green River Lakes. Two alpine lakes sit at the northern edge of the Wind River Range, their turquoise surfaces still and clear, mirroring peaks and the long curve of the valley floor. Fed by snowmelt from Fremont Peak, the Green River begins here, cold and narrow, winding north through sage and stone. Square Top Mountain, one of the most recognizable summits in the range, towers above it all, its flat peak rising sharply from the ridgeline like a wall of granite. Boats move slowly across the water, kayaks and canoes gliding past mirrored trees and sunlit inlets. Their wakes fade quickly, swallowed by a surface that looks painted in glacier blue. the land still carries their roots, shaped by time, water, and the quiet pull of elevation. Mammoth Hot Springs. Layer by layer, the ground rises, formed not by ice but by heat. Mammoth Hot Springs builds itself upward, growing terraces of stone where steam and water meet. At the surface, it cools and leaves minerals behind, building white travertine terraces that climb 300 feet into the air. Some grow steadily, others fall silent, turning gray as channels below shift unseen. Long before scientists arrived, indigenous tribes called this place sacred. The Lakota, Crow, and Shoshone saw the steaming earth not as a curiosity, but as a sign of the world's inner forces. Wild elk often pass through the upper terraces, weaving between boardwalks and warm ground. They graze near the vents and settle beside the stone formations, as if the land were their own. Heat paints the surface in color. Red bacterial threads cling to the hottest pools, while yellow spreads where the water cools. The terraces mimic cave formations, but in reverse, growing outward, not down, a landscape sculpted by addition, still forming, still shifting, built from nothing but water and time. Shell Creek. It flows in the wrong direction. Instead of draining east with the rest of the land, Shell Creek cuts northwest through the Big Horn Basin to join the Big Horn River, carving a quiet path against the grain. Over time, it's carved a shallow canyon through sandstone and shale, where rust-colored seams and fossil-bearing rock trace the memory of an ancient sea. After spring runoff, the cliffs peel back just enough to expose ancient layers laid down by a sea long vanished. Settlers named the creek after finding fossilized shells along its banks. Ammonites and shark teeth still surface after heavy rain, pulled from stone laid down 50 million years ago. Each storm reshapes the cliffs, uncovering pieces of a sea that never fully left. Piedmont. Once a frontier town built on timber and steam, Piedmont is now a ghost. Scattered foundations and crumbling kilns set against the open plains. In the 1860s, it was built as a stop along the Union Pacific Railroad. Workers burned pine in stone ovens to make charcoal, fueling the steam engines passing through. When the tracks were rerouted, the town vanished almost overnight. Its saloon, schoolhouse, and homes abandoned to wind and weather. What's left are hollow frames and leaning walls, the last outlines of a town, erased by time. Hartville. Rusted iron valves still protrude from the hillside, remnants of Wyoming's first commercial iron mine. Hartville sits where the plains meet the Laramie Mountains at 5,000 feet elevation. Its main street lined with false front buildings left over from the 1880s boom. The Sunrise Mine pulled high-grade hematite from the hills until 1980, leaving behind 2,000 feet of underground shafts. Only one business remains open, the Hartville Saloon, established in 1892. Few remember when 1,000 people lived here, or that John D. Rockefeller once invested in the mines, in a town that outlasted its purpose, but kept its bones. Lamar Valley. A vast grassland stretches between high mountain ranges. Lamar Valley spans 50 square miles along the Yellowstone River at 7,300 feet elevation. Bison move through the valley in loose groups, grazing near riverbanks and across open flats. Their pace is steady, deliberate, as they follow trails pressed into the land over generations. They cross roads without hesitation, stopping traffic in long lines that seem less like interruption and more like ceremony. Here in Wyoming, they still belong to the land, and the land still belongs to them. The Lamar River winds through the valley floor, slow and constant, feeding the grasslands and shaping the rhythm of movement. Herds shift across the range. Shadows stretch and fold into the grass, and the same quiet tension continues, predator and prey, sharing space in a place still ruled by instinct. Weston Hills Recreation Area. North of Gillette, the land breaks into wide ridges and shallow draws, 8,000 acres of hard ground where the plains begin to fold. Weston Hills is quiet country, bordered by cattle fences and marked by pale dirt roads that climb through juniper and sage. Some paths lead to open flats where campers set up for the night, away from roads and noise. Others wind between ridgelines, where you can walk for hours and not see another person. There are no designated trails, no marked campsites, just space to drive, walk, rest, or wait. The land stays wide and quiet no matter how far you go. Flaming Gorge. Its walls were carved over millions of years by the Green River, then flooded in 1964 when the dam was completed. What began as a steep-walled canyon became a 91-mile reservoir stretching across the border of Wyoming and Utah, holding back 3.8 million acre-feet of water. Cold releases from the base of Flaming Gorge Dam keep the water at a steady 46 degrees Fahrenheit, creating ideal conditions for lake and rainbow trout that grow to record sizes. At the reservoir's northern edge, Green River Bay remains especially calm and clear, still enough to reflect the sky and canyon walls like glass. In in summer, motorboats and kayaks glide across the surface, leaving faint wakes that ripple along sandstone coves. The Flaming Gorge Bridge spans the canyon just above the bay, a 1,180-foot steel suspension bridge completed 2 years before the dam. It remains the longest of its kind in Wyoming. In winter, the gorge falls silent. The surface freezes between sandstone walls, and beneath the ice, the Green River rests, its presence unchanged beneath a landscape remade. Old Faithful. Beneath Yellowstone's crust, pressure builds until it finds a single exit, sending a burst of steam 185 feet into the air. Old Faithful's eruptions last between 90 seconds and 5 minutes, ejecting 3,700 to 8,400 gallons of water. Its timing has been tracked ever since the Washburn expedition named it in 1870, and rangers still post predicted eruption times outside visitor centers. But this precision hides deeper volatility. The 1959 Hebgen Lake earthquake altered Old Faithful's intervals by nearly 10 minutes. In recent decades, intervals between eruptions have now lengthened by about 30 minutes, driven by seismic shifts beneath the surface. Visitors gather on boardwalks, waiting for the first hiss, then the roar, when the pressure below finally finds its release. A clockwork force in an unpredictable world.